Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Mitch Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing the brand new Tier 8 Czechoslovakian Premium Tank Destroyer. It's the SHPTK-TVP 100, or SHPTK, or just the TVP 100, however you want to say it. But I'm going to be reviewing this vehicle today, comparing it to other Tier 8 tank destroyers that are very similar in the playstyle. I'll show you my command and equipment setup. We'll have a look at the little bit of armor that this tank has on the side, and then we'll get stuck into 3 gameplays that show how this very fierce tank destroyer with a very rapid DPM performs on the battlefield. But first I'd like to say Happy New Year to everyone out there. I hope you all had a great New Year's Eve, or a very chilled one if you stayed at home, and thank you all so much for supporting me last year, and I can't wait to put out more content and engage with you as a community in 2023. But today we are looking at the SHPTK-TVP 100, like I said, which is the brand new tank destroyer. It's the first Czechoslovakian tank destroyer in the game, and it's a premium tier 8. It's got a 100mm gun with a very rapid DPM, and it's a very sneaky boy indeed. But first, before we get into the stats of this vehicle, let's scroll on down and have a look at the price of the vehicle. And as usual, you can get it in a variety of bundles. You can get the primed bundle, which comes with equipment, premium time and boosters for 14,000 gold. You can get the fully loaded bundle, which comes with premium time and boosters for 11,900 gold. And if you just want the tank on its own, you can get it for 9,600 gold, which is a relatively normal price for a tier 8 premium tank. And if you like your sneaky tank destroyers, I'm pretty damn sure you are going to like this tank. But it's not too overpriced. It's still fairly pricey for a pixelated tank in a game, but yeah, we're all a bit addicted, aren't we? But you can get that from today, the 3rd of January, as I'm recording this video, until the 31st of January. So keep that in mind if you want to pick up this vehicle. So here is the TVP 100, or the SHPTK. As you can see, it's got that TVP hull like you have on the TVP-T50-51, the Czechoslovakian Tier 10 medium tank. And yeah, it's got a little bit of side armor you can use, and they've put on this 100mm gun with a little bit of a gun shield to protect against HE rounds going through and heat rounds. So definitely watch out for that, and I'll show you about that in the armor viewer on tanks.gg in a bit. But you can see it's a very long tank because of that TVP hull. However, it does have a brilliant concealment value. So we're going to head over here to this Excel spreadsheet where I've put the stats of the TVP 100 here on the left, and we're going to be comparing it to 3 other Tier 8 premium tank destroyers in the World War II game mode. And the 3 that I have chosen are the NM116 Panzerjäger, which was released towards the end of last year, I believe. Very similar in playstyle, and we're also going to compare to the Scorpion G, which a lot of players have, and it's very loved in the game. A relatively sneaky tank destroyer with a similar playstyle, and of course the Canon Jagdpanzer 105, which I believe was is a tank that you can get with the current Allegiance season. But it's another sneaky tank destroyer, and it has a similar playstyle. So we're going to see how the SHPTK-TVP 100 holds up against these tanks. If you haven't seen me do any of these reviews before, just to let you know about the colour coding, green is the best stat, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, and the ones highlighted in yellow are the updated stats with my commander and equipment setup applied, and I'll tell you about that in due course. But we're going to start with the XP, commander XP and silver bonus that these tanks have. Well, the TVP 100 has 15% XP bonus, no commander XP bonus, and a 50% silver bonus. So you can see here that it's joint best in terms of its XP and its silver bonus. So these all have 50% as a silver bonus, so you're going to be making some good silver if you put out some good damage in this tank, and it doesn't take very long to do so. Next, we're going to move on to the hit points, and as you can see here, it has 1,150 hit points. It's a little bit better than the NM116 Panzerjäger. It's the same as the Scorpion G, and a little bit behind the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105, which is the best in this comparison, and has 1,200 hit points. But you've got enough to take between 3 to sort of 6 rounds depending on what gang caliber is firing at you, and you're going to want to be using the concealment, the mobility of this tank, and the fact that you do have a fully traversable turret to take down the enemy. Next, we're going to get on to the view range, and it doesn't have fantastic view range at 370 meters, but it is the joint best in this comparison, better than the Scorpion G and the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105, and the same as the NM116, and you can definitely boost that up to a very good level, and I highly recommend you do so, because you can combine that with the great concealment that this tank has to outspot the enemy. Speaking of the still concealment rating, it's 331.61 meters. That is not quite as good as the NM116 Panzerjäger, which has 304.78 meters still concealment, and both of these tanks are worse than the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105, which is the sneakiest, but they are very good figures indeed. As you can see, they are much better than the Scorpion G, and that's a relatively sneaky tank, so you can boost that up with your commander concealment skills, and I'll show you how I do that in just a little bit. But it's a very sneaky boy, and you can get that down to a very good level, as you can see here on the right in the highlighted stats, with my equipment and commander setup applied. And yeah, you can really do some damage to tanks that don't have good view range. Next, we're going to look at the mobility of the SHPTK-TVP 100, and it's good news in terms of its mobility. You have a 700 horsepower engine, a power to weight ratio of 21.88. You are limited to 55 kilometers an hour forwards, which is a shame, but you can go a nice 20 kilometers an hour in reverse. Your hull traverse is 42 degrees a second, and your turret traverse is 32 degrees a second. So when we're comparing these tanks, it's important to note that the TVP 100, the NM116 and the Scorpion G all have fully traversable turrets, whereas the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105 can only move its gun 15 degrees to the left and 15 degrees to the right. So definitely bear that in mind when we're looking at the stats of these tanks. So it has the best engine power and the best power to weight by a little bit over the NM116, much better than the Scorpion G, and even better than the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105. It gets to its top forward speed of 55 kilometers an hour very quickly indeed, but it is a shame that it is limited. So if you were so inclined, you could use the traction system as a piece of equipment and boost that up by 10%. However, I would recommend doing it a different way, and I'll show you in just a little bit. But 55 kilometers an hour, more than enough to get where you need to be and play that mid to long range sniping support role and outspotting your opponents. But you can go forward and play a little bit of a scouting role if needs be. It's a shame that it's limited to 55 kilometers an hour, but yeah, it's still not a bad figure. The best in this comparison goes to the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105 at 70 kilometers an hour forwards and 20 in reverse. In terms of the reverse speed, 20 kilometers an hour is brilliant for getting off of those ridgelines, getting out of the way of enemy incoming fire and protecting your hit points because you don't have much armor at all. Your hull traverse at 42 degrees a second is very nice, not quite as good as the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105, but bear in mind that is a non-turreted tank, so it's very awkward to use that and the gun at the same time. So it's got a very nice traverse speed, a very nice power to weight ratio, and a brilliant reverse speed. And the turret traverse is 32 degrees a second, I should say, which is better than the NM116, which is a very good tank indeed. Much, much better than the Scorpion G, and that's the gun speed here on the right, 22 degrees a second of the Canonian Jagdpanzer 105. So it's very mobile indeed, able to engage at close range and keep your gun around who's trying to get around you, and it's very flexible on the battlefield. Next, we're going to look at the guns of all of these tanks, and the TVP 100 in particular has a 100mm gun with 250 alpha damage, which is quite an unusual alpha damage for a 100mm gun. It's quite low compared to other 100mm guns in the game, but it does have fantastic gun handling and DPM, which we'll get on to in just a bit. But the TVP-100, what ammunition does it fire? Well, it fires AP as standard, heat as its premium ammunition choice, and HE as its third ammunition choice. And the HE on this tank is absolutely fantastic, and I'll tell you why in just a second. The shell velocity on the standard AP rounds is slow at 897 meters a second. Your heat drops to 795 meters a second, and your HE is the fastest round, which is very unusual at 900 meters a second. You have 270 millimeters of standard penetration, which is absolutely fantastic for a tier 8 tank destroyer, and you have full-blooded 330 millimeters of heat penetration for fighting those super heavies at tiers 8, 9 and 10, and you have fantastic penetration on your HE rounds at 100 millimeters of penetration. You can go through many different tanks from the side and even some from the front, and it does really wreck the HP of artillery if you find them at the end of the game and get a nice juicy treat for all of your hard work. In terms of the alpha damage, like I said, 250 alpha damage on your standard and your premium rounds, and those lovely 100mm penetration HE rounds deal 420 damage, and if you use those and you penetrate, you are racking your DPM up to an astronomical level. So in terms of the comparison then of all of these tanks, you can see here that it does have the worst shell velocity on its standard and on its heat rounds, and it has a relatively good shell velocity on its HE rounds, but you do have to watch out firing at mid to long ranges. You have to give plenty of lead, and it does take a while to get used to. When you're firing at really long ranges, it can be very hard to hit your opponents, but at mid ranges you do get used to it. It's a little bit below the 1000 meters a second, which is a good marker for a good shell velocity in my opinion. It is slow, so that's definitely something to take into consideration when you think that the Canon Jagdpanzer has 1478 meters a second on its standard APCR rounds, and that the NM116, which is very popular, very similar in play style, has 1275. So if you hate having to give lots of lead and you're not very used to slow velocity guns, then this might not be the tank for you. In terms of the actual alpha damage, 250 alpha damage is the worst in this comparison, or the lowest. Is even lower than the 90mm on the NM116, which has 280 alpha damage. 30 less than the 90mm, showing you that it is a very low alpha damage indeed, but it does have a very nice DPM to back that up. On the plus side, as you can see, best penetration in this comparison on all three rounds, and those HE rounds are absolutely fantastic. If you do want to fire heat at super heavies, 330mm is more than enough to go through super heavies from the front, especially at mid to close ranges. So best in this comparison in terms of its shell velocity is that Canon Jagdpanzer 105, but bear in mind, you can only move your gun 15 degrees to the left and to the right, and you don't have a turret to traverse at all, so that's something to bear in mind. And you also have fantastic concealment and mobility with the TVP-100, so it's all good news at the moment. Now we're going to get onto the gun handling, and it gets even better for the TVP-100 here. You have an aim time of 1.3 seconds, which is absolutely fantastic as a base value. You have an accuracy of 0.32, which is very nice indeed, and you can get down to a pinpoint accuracy level. Your DPM is the best in this comparison at 2,585 base DPM, which for a tier 8 premium tank and a tank destroyer with such a low alpha damage is absolutely fantastic, and that's because you have a 5.8 second base reload for that 250 alpha damage. And if you do use those HE rounds, you're going to be almost doubling your DPM by using and penetrating those HE rounds. Unfortunately, you only have 6 degrees of gun depression, which is the worst in this comparison, but you do have the best in this comparison in terms of gun elevation at 20 degrees, meaning that shooting up isn't usually a problem. And you also carry 66 rounds of ammunition, which is more than enough in my experience in my play session in this tank to get you through pretty much every battle you're going to come into, unless it's some kind of epic game there. And if you do run out of ammunition, have an epic game, please send it to me. That would be awesome to put on the channel. But in terms of the comparison then to the other tanks, you can see that it does have the best aim time by quite some way. The NM116 is the next best at 2 seconds. So 0.7 seconds better than the second best. Best accuracy goes to the Scorpion G at 0.3, but 0.32 is only a little bit behind, and it's better than the NM116 and the Canon Jagdpanzer 105. Best DPM in this comparison, only by a little bit over the NM116, which is very similar in playstyle in terms of its concealment, mobility, and its DPM, as you have already seen. Much better DPM than the Canon Jagdpanzer 105, and even better than the Scorpion G with its big 128mm alpha damage of 490. In terms of the gun depression, it is the worst in this comparison. The NM116 with 10 degrees, it's much more flexible on a ridgeline. Even the Scorpion G is better at 7 degrees, and the Canon Jagdpanzer 105 at 8 degrees. But like I said, the best gun, elevation, 20 degrees, more than enough when you're shooting up. Much better than the NM116, the Scorpion G, and the Canon Jagdpanzer 105. So gun handling, DPM, accuracy, all fantastic. Great mobility, great concealment. Shell velocity is poor, top forward speed holds it back, and it's a low alpha damage, meaning you do have to expose yourself more to get that damage out. But if you're used to your sneaky tank destroyers using the vision mechanics in the game, then you should be good in this tank. In terms of my commander and equipment setup, then in terms of the equipment, I run advanced concealment, advanced optics, and advanced loader. And in terms of my commander skills, I run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Camouflage Expertise, Muffled Shot, and Situational Awareness. So in terms of the advanced concealment, I'm boosting up my concealment value. Optics, getting that view range as high as possible, and loader to improve the already very impressive DPM. And in terms of my commander skills, Sixth Sense and Born Leader are standard on every commander I run. Rapid loading to improve the DPM. I have 3 gun handling skills. You might want to take one of them out and add an extra camouflage skill, because I only have 2 camouflage skills, but that does bring it down to a nice level. And situational awareness to again use in conjunction with the advanced optics and boost up my view range. So if you run the exact same setup as me, you'll be looking at a view range of 473 meters, which is very nice indeed, especially when you compare that to, or use in conjunction with, the 245 meters still concealment that I now have using those concealment perks and the advanced concealment piece of equipment. That means that I'm able to outspot many different tanks, especially medium tanks, heavy tanks, and larger tank destroyers. In terms of the mobility, the only thing that has changed is the turret traverse. That's because of the gun handling skills on the commander. It's now gone up from 32 degrees a second to 38.92 degrees a second, much closer to the hull traverse speed, which is very good for moving your hull and your turret at the same time and getting your gun round to people that might be trying to circle you or flank you. In terms of the gun handling and DPM, then I've now got a 1.2 second aim time, which is absolutely insane. That's kind of Cold War level aim time, and also Cold War level accuracy at 0.26. And I now have a DPM of 3,545. Bear in mind, I do use combat rations as my third consumable choice. And that means that I now reload in 4.23 seconds for that 250 alpha damage with your standard AP premium heat, or I reload in 4.23 seconds for that lovely 420 HE. And if you penetrate that, you're almost doubling that DPM, which would be absolutely crazy. So now we're going to head over to tanks.gg, have a quick look at the armour profile, then we'll get stuck into the gameplay. Not too much to say, it's the same hull as on the TVP-T50-51 at tier 10, the Czechoslovakian tier 10 auto-loading medium tank. So if you play that tank, you'll have a good idea of how this armour works on the hull. Massive lower plate. It's only 65mm thick, and the effective armour value is around 86mm, so 90mm or more penetration will go through this. If you're shooting at another TVP-100 with this same tank and HE, you can go through the front of this tank, even on the turret, which is only 50mm and effective up to 90mm. The only thing to watch out here on the front is the gun blocking your shells, or this little gun shield round the top. To go through this, you're looking at sort of 116mm of penetration to the sides, and above it are roughly the same. If it's using the full extent of its 6 degrees of gun depression here, don't shoot the top of this gun shield, because there's no armour above it and it won't be able to penetrate at all. And even when it's using its gun depression, you can see here you only need about 80mm of penetration to go through the front, 130mm to go through the upper hull, and the turret 100mm or more to go through. The main thing about this tank is it is actually quite a good side scraper for gun calibers that are 120mm or less. So if this thing is being shot at by a 90mm caliber gun, it's going to be an auto ricochet all the way down the side because you have 40mm of side armor. So that's 40mm times by 3 plus 1mm, which is a 121mm caliber gun. You need to overmatch the side of this tank. But one thing to bear in mind if you're side scraping in this tank is obviously your turret is going to be weak, and you do have this little portion here which is around 120mm of penetration to go through. And if you're below this tank and it's side scraping you, you can shoot up into this flap and penetrate underneath this little join to the side and the upper hull. Apart from that, you're going to be able to go through this tank pretty damn easily every time. If you're above it and it's side scraping, you definitely can shoot down on the engine deck, and you only need 30mm of penetration to go through. And as you can see, it's a very large profile tank from the side and very easy to go through, and not very nice to artillery because it's an open topped turret, meaning that you're going to be going straight down there, 20mm of armor, and you're going to be getting absolutely annihilated. But yeah, try and side scrape where possible, use the vision mechanics, the concealment, and try and stay out of harm's way in this tank, because the front of the hull is absolutely terrible. You only have this little gun shield and the gun to block some rounds. So that's it for the stats and everything else about the SHPTK-TVP 100. Let's now get stuck into the first of 3 gameplays. So we're now into the first of 3 games here in today's video on the SHPTK-TVP 100. We're on Erlenberg. We've spawned in the north of the map, and I'm going to head to somewhere I don't usually go on this map, but towards the centre in this little town area, and try and spot out towards the east side of the map, because this map becomes a stalemate quite often. People sit in the west or the east on the hills and they don't move, and it's usually the first team to move that loses, because they lose tank after tank from trying to cross from one side to the other. When the enemy's defences are weak and there's a little bit of a gap in the enemy's defences, you can push across the bridge where our medium tank is situated in E5. That can be the best way to cross this map and get under the gun lines of tanks that are on the 9 line, meaning that you're not able to get shot, and if they push over the ridge to get you, they will get obliterated by the line of tanks that are behind you. But for the moment, we're going to just hang around here in the centre of the map. We've got shots at tanks that are trying to go towards the 2 line here, across the south. We've got one shot here, and you can see the shell velocity is a little bit awkward at that range. After a while, you do get used to it. But if you absolutely hate slow shell velocity guns, this one might not be the one for you, and maybe you'll prefer the NM116 Panzerjäger. But you're already seeing the camouflage here. We haven't got spotted, and we're firing at distances where a heavy tank or a medium tank would most likely be spotted. And I'm very confident playing this view range game because I'm very used to the World War II game mode, played it since I started in World of Tanks console, obviously, because Cold War wasn't in it then, and I'm very used to playing light tanks and tank destroyers that have very good concealment and finding different areas where I can abuse the vision mechanics. So in a tank like the TVP 100 here, or the NM116 Panzerjäger, or the Canon Jagdpanzer 105 or Scorpion G, you want to make sure you're making use of your mini-map in the bottom right. I always use the square map, because I can see the view range black circle, which is the furthest most circle here, and the dotted line, which is my still concealment rating, as well as the 50 meters proximity detection circle, which is flashing around my tank. And keeping an eye on those 3 lines means that I can always keep the tanks at arm's length. I can always retreat to a position where I can still remain undetected and still put my gun to work. In a tank like this, you also want to make use of all the foliage on the map. When you're spotting tanks, sit with your gun through the bush so it's transparent, and when you want to fire, pull back till it's opaque, and then you retain all of that tree or all of that bush's concealment factor. You want to put all of the concealment perks on your commander, or skills on your commander, and you want to use advanced concealment to completely make your tank as near to invisible as you can. As you'll see when you come to tier 10, or if you already play tier 10, the Terrans at the moment that are around, the SU-152 Terrans that have crazy concealment for the size profile of their tank, but they're using their concealment to just annihilate you from distance, and there's nothing you can do if you're in a tank with poor view range. You just have to be very wary of where the enemy tank destroyers might be, and you also have to try and find different ways to advance into positions without being out in the open, because you can see what's happening here to this poor Skoda T56. We've already got a couple of shells into him, and we're going to now fire before he comes round this building using the slow shell velocity, so that when we fired, he was behind hard cover, he wouldn't have been able to detect me. And even if he wasn't in hard cover, I'm pretty sure at this distance I'd be able to fire and not get detected around 400 meters, especially against a tier 7 tank like that Leo to the left. And it's all about playing this vision game. You want to use the mobility to get into positions to outspot your opponents, keep an eye on the minimap, retreat with your great mobility, and it's a very powerful tank indeed. The best players in the game are really going to abuse this tank and be absolutely phenomenal in it, and there's just nothing you can do. A poor tier 6 there in the Jackson comes over the bridge very valiantly, but he gets taken out for his troubles, and we're just defending the cap circle. We retreated from the town because we knew we lost the east of the map, and now we're just situated here. I can always pull back with the nice reverse speed behind this hard cover to my right, and I'm just outspotting these tanks trying to come towards our capture circle, and at the moment there's nothing they can do. I'm still a bit wary about getting spotted by tanks that might be behind them and taken out, because if I was in the middle of a field, if the Leo and the Skoda T56 spotted me, it would only take 2 shots very quickly from that 2-tap auto-loader on the Skoda T56, and 1 shot from the Leo if he's using the big gun, and I'll be out of the game, because 1150 hit points don't go very far indeed. And that is the big weakness of this tank. If you're a high alpha damage tank, or you're a tank with good DPM, you can shred this thing and take it out, and take out the danger that it poses. But we found a position here to use 6 degrees of gun depression on. It's not very easy to find ridgelines in the game that 6 degrees works on very reliably, but I fortunately found this one, and we're just rocking backwards and forwards in between our shells. We're firing at that Scorpion G, which we know we can penetrate without having to load any kind of premium round or anything. I really should be loading the HE here and boosting up my DPM and chance to take out that Scorpion G. And now we're just trying to pinpoint a weakness on top of the Skoda T56. As you can see, it's not easy from this angle, but he's just not able to spot me. We do find a position there to the left of his turret, which we go through, and now he is a one-shot. There is the Scorpion to his left, and I've loaded the HE rounds, which have that 100mm of penetration, that 420 alpha damage, and it won't take me very long to completely obliterate this Scorpion and hopefully just splash this Skoda T56 and take him out as he's on low hit points. So we come round, put 432 damage with the HE round in that Scorpion, and we reloaded again. Lazily auto-aim, which means I track him, don't do any damage, but we follow it up, aiming through his hull and penetrating, and now I'm happy to take a shell from this Skoda T56 if I can splash and kill him. Again, lazily auto-aim. I should have just stopped and aimed. This has more than enough good aim time and accuracy for me to stop and aim. It's terrible on the move. The bloom is very large, as you can see, so that's something to bear in mind. But I was confident there to use my hit points at the end of the game, albeit a little bit recklessly, to help take this one down, and in the end we pick up a nice profit of nearly 370,000 silver, finish second on our team with 3 kills, 4.7k direct damage and 243 assistance. So that's it for the first game. We're now going to head on into the second one. Right, so we're now into the second game of today's video, and we are on Westfield, which is my favourite map, and it's a great map for a tank that has such good concealment. Lots of long sight paths for me to be able to put the DPM out, stay undetected, and hopefully pick up a good game. So we've spawned here in the northeastern corner of Westfield, and I'm going to head towards this bridge here, and maybe even a little bit further to the ridgeline beyond it, and try and get shots at tanks that are crossing the south and to the centre of the map. There's a nice ridge there I can stay undetected behind, because staying detected would be a bad thing. And hopefully we're going to be able to take this one down with the help of our team. You can see here that we're one of the first ones getting into position. Again, just highlighting how good the mobility is. We're going to take a quick pot shot, guessing where that tank got undetected and went to. Unfortunately, we do miss. At this kind of distance, it will be hard to hit tanks that are going fast, but they're going uphill, so we don't have to give too much lead at all at this kind of distance, and the shell velocity won't be too much of an issue. Get a lovely snapshot there into, I think it was the Canon Jagdpanzer 105 on the enemy team, meaning that we get a nice bit of damage to start off this battle. And yeah, just showing you how good the gun handling is on this tank. Basics are already good, but when you have applied a good command and equipment setup, you're going to be laughing with the gun handling and DPM of this tank. It's just very dangerous indeed, and it's a lot of fun to play. We fire there, fortunately set that poor IS-6 on fire, get another shell, and every 4 seconds you're just dishing out this hurt on these enemy tanks. He gets tracked, we get another shell into him, and if we don't reload, he would definitely have been taken out there. But again, we reloaded so quickly in 4.2 seconds, and the IS-6 is taken out of the game, and that's a tier 8 Soviet premium heavy tank already out. I'm going to try and get a shell on that Carnarvon, but unfortunately we miss. Get a shell there on that SU-130PM. It looked like it bounced for some reason. Not sure why it would bounce, but we loaded the HE in anticipation for our next shell, because we'd be able to go through the front of him with the great 100mm of penetration that this tank has. And we're getting some nice spotting assistance as well, due to the fact that we have boosted up our view range and we're spotting tanks that are in the centre of this map, and we're able to fire with impunity here from the top of this ridge. I've got to be a bit careful of tanks seeing my shell tracers and blind firing where I am, and artillery as well. But I'm also going to try and knock down buildings, because I've got so many shells, I've got such great DPM. Firing one round to knock down a building and exposing a tank in the middle isn't going to be an issue for me, and it just feels so nice to have a tank with such good DPM, especially one with such good concealment. It probably shouldn't have this good concealment considering it's got the TVP hull, but you know, what are you going to do? I guess it sells very well, or it will do when people look at all of the reviews and see how well this tank is doing. Spoiler alert, I won't ace this tank in today's video, although I'm going to have some pretty nice games in these last couple games. That just shows you how good this tank is already being played on day one. Usually an ace tank is very easy to come across, however I didn't manage it. We've already got a 3.1k combined damage game. We are absolutely annihilating the enemy. We're sort of confining them to the western side of the map, and we're going to advance on these ridgelines and see if we can get some nice shells at any kind of opponent we see. UDES 03 there, one of the sneakiest tanks in the game. We load an HE round for our second round, and he subsequently gets taken out, and it's just the hurt you can put on tier 8, tier 7 and tier 6 tanks in this tank is very dangerous. You can take them out very quickly, and even tier 9 and 10 tanks you can rip them to shreds if you find a good position and you're able to stay hidden. We can pop round here. We should have enough penetration to go through the front of his turret with heat, which I've now loaded, I should say, if I can speak, with 330mm of penetration. Having a bit of trouble finding the right place to go through. I am also rocking backwards and forwards, so I probably flinched a couple shells there. But we fortunately get one through the front of his turret, and having that flexibility to switch between great standard penetration and real full-blooded 330mm heat rounds means you're very dangerous to tanks that have good armour. And I've been looking forward to this tank since it came out on PC not too long ago, and now it's in World of Tanks console. It's going to be one of my favourites, along with the NM116 Panzerjäger. Very good concealment, very good DPM. They're both very similar in playstyle. NM116 is probably more friendly to a newer player due to the fact it has extra gun depression, better top forward speed, and it's a smaller profile tank. But that's it nearly for this second game. We are now just trying to get the last remnants of damage. You can see there That accuracy on the move is terrible because your gun blooms out a lot, but when you stop, you aim in so quickly. However, I do want to get under the gun line of these tanks and don't get caught out in the open. I'd like to get a little bit extra damage at the end of this game, so we're going to rush forward as fast as we can with the pretty decent power to weight ratio this tank has, and see if we can not get a shell in on this Dragon or on the heavy tank that is to his right. Already picked up 3.2k direct damage, 1043 assistance and 2 kills, which is absolutely awesome. Our Tiger 1's getting annihilated on his own, but the backup won't be too far behind. You can see we're making the tanks behind us lag behind with our mobility, and that means you can get the extra damage at the end of the battle to boost up your damage total, get that extra XP, and more importantly get that lovely extra silver with this premium tank. So now we're going to come over the ridgeline, and I'm going to do what I usually do and be very lazy and just fire without aiming in there. You can see that even when you're moving a little bit, it still does miss occasionally with that pretty horrendous bloom when you are moving. But when you're moving at very slow speeds or you're stationary, it's pinpoint accurate and you haven't got to aim in at all to acquire your target. And having that fully traversable turret is brilliant. We've loaded an HE round here for the side of this Dragon, lovely penetrating round there, and we try and get through one through the upper part of the side of his hull. We hit his track, no matter, we are reloaded again within 4 seconds, get an HE round through his side, and he's taken out of the game, and you know, just like that we're up to 4.2k direct damage, 1000 assistance. That's only a second class in a tier 8 tank destroyer, 1.8k base experience, 370,000 silver profit, 3 kills, and a very nice game indeed. So that's it for the second game there on Westfield. We're now going to head into the best game that I've had in this tank so far, in the third and final game. We're now into the third and final game of today's video, and we are here on Pearl River. We're in a tier 10 game, so you're going to see how this thing holds up against tier 9 and tier 10 tanks. We have spawned in the southeast of the map, and we're going to head along the south and see if we can get some shots along the 1 and 2 line. Going to go to a very familiar position to me, which I like to go in with very sneaky light tanks and tank destroyers. Try and get some of our own vision off to start the battle, but also a position which allows me to target the enemy tank destroyers and tanks that like to cross the open field to my right. We're going to go up here, and this is the location I was on about here on Pearl River, located around J3. We can spot out towards very familiar camping locations for the enemy team from the enemy opposition spawn, I should say, around E1, E2. We're already getting a bit of assistance due to our view range. We get one shell there at that T-34 who's crossing, and he gets taken out by our King Dragon. So that's already one enemy tank taken care of. I've got to be careful because of this Oh-Ho. If he's using the derp gun, definitely can do a lot of damage to me because of our poor armor, but we do fire without getting undetected, which is a common occurrence in this tank. Get a shell into him and we're still getting some extra spotting assistance. Just have to be very wary of tanks that enter the town because they have shots on you here, so you have this little ridge to pull back on behind, I should say, and keep your tank nice and safe. Gonna have a shot at this FE 4005. Wait for it to aim in, pinpoint accurate, lovely aim time, and then we can get a shot right through the front of that Panzer 58 Mutz. The standard penetration doing great work for us so far. You can see that I carry 20 heat, 10 HE, and the rest with the standard penetration, and I've been making pretty good bank with every single game that I've been playing in this tank, and it's been a nice and very fruitful session for my silver balance in the garage. So up to 1.2k direct now, 1.2k assistance. We're having a decent impact in a tier 10 battle. Just got to be a little bit more patient because you will be definitely punished for your mistakes in this tank very, very quickly indeed. We get a shell there on that Badger. We try to go for the tracks there to track him in place, because if he was track side on, non-turreted tank destroyer, that will be a nice yummy treat. However, we didn't manage to take his tracks off, and that's usually one of the first places I'll go for when I'm shooting at a tank with this tank. I'm going for their tracks, trying to keep them in place, and I'm going to try and put round after round to their tracks, keep them perma-tracked, and it means that I'm able to get as many rounds as possible in. If you do get shot in this tank, or if you do want to exchange 1-for-1 with someone that maybe has higher alpha damage, you've got to make sure you're putting in at least 2 or 3 rounds into them for every one they're firing into you to make it worth your while. If that's a situation you find yourself in, you've got to make the most of your DPM, otherwise you will get taken out very quickly. We loaded the heat rounds here, going through the tier 10 heavy and this OHO. We played with fire there. We do get hit by the OHO, but he's using what looks like the smaller gun on that tank, and puts us down to 800 damage, but we should be able to go through that OHO. It's all about just getting re-stealthed and popping up from a slightly different location than we did last time, keeping them guessing so that they're not able to blind fire when we get into position. And it's a little bit of a dangerous situation where I am now. All of my tanks are behind me, and there's one tank destroyer located in E0 who won't be able to help me from here. So I am putting the view range out, but I'm also putting myself at risk. But it's a nice impact for a tier 8 tank destroyer to have, and so far the teammates are backing me up on my team. We auto-locked that OHO there, and that just shows the fantastic penetration of this tank. It went straight through. I didn't want to risk going over aiming. I just wanted to see if I could finish him off. Unfortunately we did. That Super Conqueror there is a bit of a nuisance, but we've spotted this M47 Iron Arnie crossing, and that will allow us to get some shells in when he's crossing, damage his engine, which he repairs very quickly indeed, and we're just trying to get as many shots in as he crosses this open field. Unfortunately for us, our third shell on him looked like it went into some rubble or a building or something we didn't penetrate. And I do have to be very careful here, because it won't only be this Iron Arnie that's trying to shoot me. There will be other tanks. But I'm in a relatively good position. I've got most of my hull covered, and I just have to poke out, get shots in where possible. We're going to track him in place there, get a shot through the side of the Iron Arnie's turret, and now he's distracted by our friendly tanks, and he gets taken out by our Turan. And it's a very close game, as you can see. I'm the first kind of one forward in terms of spotting down this 1 and 2 line, and I am worried about getting flanked behind me, but I also want to try and put my gun to work and get as many shots out on tanks that are crossing this open field as possible. Get one into this 705, and we should be able to get another one in with the great DPM of this tank. Go forward with the good mobility, juke him, get another shot into him, and we've damaged his ammo rack there. He goes into hard cover, and I'm going to pop out, see if I can spot this Super Conqueror. We get spotted from someone, and it would be that Super Conqueror below us. He gets blapped by our Turan for a lot of damage, just below 1000. That thing's an absolute menace. We get one shot through his upper hole there. Unfortunately, we do get slapped, I believe, from the Super Conqueror there it was, and we are now a one shot to every tank, I believe, left on the enemy team. Especially if they're going to be firing HE at me. Just trying to keep myself hidden here for as long as possible, looking for my next opportunity. Whenever I move forward here, I'm getting spotted by this Progetto 65. I make another misplay, go forward, I don't aim, and then I low roll, which means I leave that Progetto 65 on 1 hit point, which is a bit of a nuisance. Could have taken him out, that threat would have been taken out, and I would have been possibly a little bit safer in this game. Just checking my rear, checking to the side, trying to make sure I'm not getting snuck up on by anyone. We take out that Badger there, and we're having a pretty good game. Unfortunately for us, the Panzer 58 Mutz from earlier comes forward and gets his payback and takes us out with what looks to be an HE round, because he rolled pretty high for his 280 damage, I believe that tank has, or 250. Either way, we get taken out, and it's now an M47 Iron Arnie and a Turan that are both full health, or the M47 Iron Arnie is almost full health. They're sat further back than I'd like. They should be able to take this one down. It takes a lot longer than I was expecting. They could have just gone forward with the hit points and armour and taken this one out, but who knows, it might be newer players or less experienced players, and you'll see that the result was definitely worth it. So I'm going to skip forward to the end and we'll look at the result screen. So that's it for that game. We do manage to pick up a victory there. Our two teammates did take that one down in the end, and again we finished MVP with 2.2 base experience and only pick up a first class, showing you that this tank is being played exceptionally well. People are absolutely ripping people to shreds. We pick up a nice profit there of 500,000 silver. I'm not sure if that was with an op, but in a tier 10 battle, finishing an MVP in a tier 8 glass cannon tank destroyer is a pretty good result. 2 kills, 4.7k direct damage and 1.6k assistance, with a great impact there in a battle that lasted 12 minutes but could have lasted around 8. However, I'm happy with the victory. I love this tank, very similar to the NM116, not quite as easy to play for a newer or less experienced player. Shell velocity you have to watch out for, and the top forward speed, and the 6 degrees of gun depression, but apart from that, if you use the vision mechanics, set it up correctly, it's a very decent tank destroyer indeed. So that's it for the first video of 2023. Thank you all so much for Watson. Thank you for Watson, and thank you for watching. Until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.